Welcome to the Coach Dave Love podcast with NBA shooting coach Dave Love and your host, Matt Robertson, exploring the cutting edge of evidence-based shooting development in basketball today, from shooting form to skill acquisition to ShotMetrics. This is the Coach Dave Love podcast.
Welcome, the Coach Dave Love podcast. I'm your host, Matt Robertson, and with me, as always, NBA shooting coach Dave Love. Dave, tell me what you've got going on this week professionally.
I have an NBA player that is currently without a contract in Calgary, Alberta, with me training, which I'm fired up about. And then I leave on Friday to head to clinics in the Toronto and Eastern Ontario region. So we've got clinics in Toronto and Kingston, Ontario, home of the Tragically Hip. And then we'll be headed from there, I believe, to an unnamed location, still awaiting a signature on a piece of paper before we can talk about any news. But yeah, going to visit a collective of people that I hope to have an official working relationship with.
That is incredibly vague. I love it. Before we move on, are there any spots left in your clinics in Toronto for this coming week, just in case we have any listeners who are in that crowd?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking. There are a couple in the Saturday morning clinic in the Toronto area. So if you go on coachdavelove.com, you can look for the train in person tab and sign up there. The Kingston clinic you can get on the waiting list, but the afternoon in Toronto and the Sunday in Kingston are both sold out.
Good job by you. Too bad for the listener, but listen, get on the waiting list. You never know what could happen. But I love to hear that. I love to hear nothing like a full gym of people getting to experience the live coaching. It's good. It's a good thing. Okay, Dave, I know we've sort of foregone with a lot of the pleasantries, and that's okay with me. I miss them. But however, we have important business to attend to. Would you like to intro the episode?
Yeah, we're going to kind of break down what we've been hinting at for almost a year now. We're gonna be talking about ShotMetrics, and we did a little bit of an intro, like a little sliver of an intro in the previous episode. We're going to go into a little bit more about what this concept is, how the idea came about, what this concept is not. And a couple of the specific ShotMetrics and overview of them right now. So fired up to finally be talking about this. And I guess I should say, like, I've got a book coming out in the very near future. I really just have to give the okay now, which for some reason I'm very nervous about. But give the okay on releasing this book and see how long the actual publication takes. But ShotMetrics, the book, is coming.
Buddy, I am so freaking excited for a lot of reasons, but we've talked about this for a very long time, and there is a lot of value, I think, to be provided through the data you're talking about. I believe in it so much, and the direction that we're heading as a sport, it's the perfect time, it's the perfect place, and I'm really excited to see what happens for this.
Me too, and I'm just excited to be having evidence shape my teaching, and not solely be reliant on experience and opinion, but start with those, and then let the research guide. And I'm really enjoying the research process that. Both the quantitative research around ShotMetrics, but then also the research papers on the non-quantitative ideas like periodization of training. Like it's been fun to be challenged to write a research paper, which the first time I was involved significantly in the writing, I thought, I can't do this. And then you get through it, and at the end of it, you're like, actually, I'm pretty proud of that. I could do that. It just was hard, and I'm really enjoying that.
Like every once in a while, I'll get an incredibly nerdy text from Dave, and it makes my day because undercover, not even undercover, I am a giant nerd. Like just if you peek slightly below the surface, it lives there, and it hits me right in the sweet spot, man. I'm so freaking excited. So this is actually an awesome place to start. Like, do you want to talk about the genesis of the idea, kind of where it was coming from? You were talking about opinions and experience. Like, how do you want to start
Yeah,
this?
like I talk about it in the introduction of the book. Like, I feel like a few different parts of my background and my personal history kind of led me down this road where the first thing that as a young teenager we would get the basketball cards that were really the only source of statistics that somebody in the 1980s had for a player. There was no internet, and so you'd get maybe Basketball Digest, and that wasn't really sold in Canada, or I, as a 12-year-old, didn't think to buy it or have the money to buy it. But I had basketball cards, and I loved Larry Bird, and Michael Jordan was at his peak. But I spent an evening or maybe a few evenings with my notepad trying to figure out a a series of statistics. I'd now say an algorithm, but I didn't know that word then. Like I tried to manipulate the statistics to prove that Larry Bird was a better basketball player than Michael Jordan, and unfortunately, I couldn't. And I couldn't find a way that would say, oh, but if you look at this from this perspective, Larry Bird was better. So I was already kind of using the math side of my brain, which I was not a great math student, but it was always like interesting to me. Then a couple of years later, I took a physics course in high school, and there was this unit within the physics course where they talked about explosions, and they would say like if a rock that weighs X amount explodes into this number of pieces, and piece one weighs this much and it travels at this speed at this angle, and piece two travels at this speed at this angle and it weighs this much, and they'd go through all the different pieces except for one, uh, how big, what angle, and at what speed would that last piece of rock go. And I found it fascinating how simple this equation was. That once you knew the equation, it wasn't hard to find out what was missing and where it went based on what was happening elsewhere. And then the last piece was taking golf lessons and just seeing how golf, being a stationary sport with one flat surface contacting a sphere or a dimpled sphere, but let's say a sphere, they were, because that dynamic is relatively simple, they were able to quantify their sport a little bit more. And I always felt like, yeah, shooting a basketball is a lot more complex, but it's the same general ideas. And so when I had all those things, the love of shooting, and then the kind of nerdy sciencey side of my brain that with another sport showing me that this was possible, I always just felt like we can quantify shooting. That was long-winded. Did I even answer the question that you asked?
Absolutely. It again, I can relate to that. For me, the first time that high school physics made sense, we had to do a project about physics in motion in the real world, and baseball is what I chose. And like now looking back, I'm like barely scratched the surface of the physics when you talk about, spin rate on the baseball, and right, but just the reaction time, the ball moving at this speed to this location, the amount of time it takes to get the bat around, the decision making process, like that is all really fascinating stuff. The physics of baseball. When you look at basketball, it's a really difficult thing to start to quantify all the physics because the dynamicism of the sport, I think that's a dynamic, yeah, Dynamicism.
Okay, I know what you mean. I'll question whether it's actually a word,
Sure.
but I it's 50-50 whether one of us is right or wrong. Dynamicism, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. The amount of dynamic activity happening in a basketball game makes it very difficult to quantify anything because there's so many moving pieces. And over the last 15 to 20 years, we've started to be able to quantify little pieces. And some of my favorite stuff when it comes to shooting, Dave, is it's like, okay, how close was this guy to me when I shot the ball? How likely am I to hit a shot if I'm an average shooter with that guy this close? All these little pieces that are very results based. Like what you're doing is so different. Anyway, I don't want to step on your toes, but let's keep going. So, the genesis of the idea was basically your love for math, quantification, basketball shooting, and that's sort of the secret sauce that led to this. Like, when did this idea come to you?
I guess it really started to take root right around COVID when number one, probably getting in too many Twitter arguments about the correct way to shoot a basketball, quote unquote, correct way, and having to step back from that, just feeling like we can do better than this. We can do better than just having opinion-based arguments where we're giving anecdotal evidence on each side to support our case. And then when COVID hit, I had already met with a group when I worked for the Orlando Magic. I'd gone to a motion capture company that did a lot of the EA Sports graphics, and just said, like, can we measure different parts of the body? And the first thing that I wanted to measure, they basically said, we might be able to do that even in our facility that is literally a half court and has hundreds of infrared cameras or whatever it is. We might be able to do that, but the cost was just astronomical. That I was so naive. I thought I was going to go in and I was going to get dressed up in the motion capture suit, and then I was going to shoot a shot and go over to the monitor and see the numbers and see the skeleton. And they were like, no, we have to process. This is just a wall of ones and zeros right now. We have to now process and sort and understand. And so it came back that, yeah, we could do this, but it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars for us to, if you can get a good number of players in the gym dressed in these suits in an orderly fashion. And so me with no budget, I was like, oh, I was hoping to do this for hundreds of dollars, not hundreds of thousands. And so there was a night kind of during as things are going on in my head, I'm starting to think, yeah, this there's just one big complicated formula that if I can plug in where your feet are pointed, how much your hips are rotating, the direction the ball is moving, how fast it is, which fingers pushed how hard in what direction. If I plug in all those numbers to this big long formula, it's going to be able to tell me where the ball goes. And we've just got to figure out what each of these important pieces are. So that was just the idea in the back of my mind. And where do you start now? Like what thing is going to be your starting point that you can build off of? And I've always felt like the most important part of a shot was how the ball left a player's hand. And so I really wanted it to do a study to understand how the fingers were working together, where good shooters truly had the ball at their set point, how the fingers pushed through the ball. And it was going to be way too hard. Even these big motion capture companies said fingers are really small. It happens really fast. And there's lots of things like basketballs and bodies in the way. It's going to be really hard to measure something that small.
Dynamicism.
And so again, you're like, crap, what the heck do I do now? And I was laying awake one night and I realized, well, wait a second. golf kind of has the same problem. They know, they're able to measure the club face, how the club face is hitting, the hard, flat club face is hitting the spherical ball. They can measure that. We don't have the luxury of a single flat club face against a sphere. We have 5 club faces all working independently of each other. This is going to be challenging, but if I work backwards, I can figure out the beginning. So like if I work backwards to say the ball was spinning this way, then I can have an idea of where the hand was on the basketball. And so that was the genesis of the first study, is being able to prove that there was a correlation between the way the ball was spinning in the air and the effectiveness of the shooter, because of where their hand would have had to have been to create that spin. And out of that, release quality was kind of born.
Whoa. Appreciate you telling that story. A lot of context for how we got to where we are. Do you want to take a quick break and then continue talking about release quality?
Sure.
Wonderful.
Hey there, basketball fans. I'm NBA shooting coach Dave Love, and I've got exciting news just for you. Introducing my exclusive, free basketball shooting newsletter. It's packed with insights and techniques straight from the hardwood. Have you ever wondered how NBA players improve their shots? Or how you could get to the next level, whether you're a college player, a coach, or a budding youth player? My newsletter brings all this and more directly to your inbox. Each edition is a deep dive into the world of basketball shooting. I'll share some of the tips and ideas that I use with my NBA clients, tailored for every level of the game. But wait, there's more. Subscribers receive exclusive monthly discounts on my online products. From training videos to personalized coaching sessions, you'll get it all for a fraction of the price. And the best part of all, it's absolutely free to join. So what are you waiting for? Elevate your game and join a community of passionate players and coaches from around the globe. Signing up is easy. Just visit CoachDaveLove.com.
All right, welcome back. So normally, if you are a frequent listener of the podcast, we put 24 up on the thought clock in my office, and coach is forced to do an ATO, which is an after timeout, which is done after timeouts, and give a concise look at what we're talking about in the last segment. However, this is a little different. This is a special podcast. This is ShotMetrics intro. So Dave, let's continue talking about release quality. Do you want to talk about Dr. Slager? Do you want to talk, like, where do you want to go with this?
Oh, yeah, we should absolutely mention Dr. Nathan Slager's in this. So I had this idea that I wanted to measure the spin of the basketball to get some insight on where good shooters had their hand on the basketball. And I don't know how to measure the spin of the ball. And I had an idea and I had next to nothing else. And so I'm trying to remember all the people that I talked to, that like I talked to all of the companies that track the spin of golf balls or baseballs or tennis balls. None of them could do basketballs. I talked to video game companies that did motion capture. They couldn't help me. I talked to baseball scouts, and a baseball scout said, you know what I would do is I just look up all the people that are doing research sort of around that and just start to email them, and then just like propose, if you get a response, propose your study idea and see if somebody bites. And I got super lucky where the first person I found was Dr. Nathan Slegers at George Fox University just outside of Portland, who had done some different studies on shooting a basketball. And I emailed him just to say I have this idea and would love to talk with you. And I think we spoke the next day. And I described to him what I wanted. I wanted to try and measure the spin of the ball. That I had this theory that the more purely the ball was spinning, the more accurate a player was going to be, not because of what happens because of the spin, but what the move that would create the spin. And he thought that was pretty compelling. He says, let me look and see how much research has been done on this. And if it's been done a lot, then do we have anything unique to say? He came back to me the next day. He says, I'm shocked. I can't find anything on this topic. And so he was all of a sudden in. And not only that, he felt like he had a way to measure the spin of the ball. And I'm not going to talk about what that is, but we've now got a way to measure how the basketball is spinning in the air, and so that was the beginning thing. And what I really love about this, and what I want to focus on more in this episode, is the fact that these shot metrics start as a hypothesis. Each one of these start as, I think this matters. I want to see if I can quantify this as a coach. But then what I think is separating us right now and making things really important is we're not just reliant on, okay, Dave, the shooting coach, thinks this is important. We can now attach a number to it, and we're just going with it. We're then doing a study to find out whether this is in fact relevant or not. Do better shooters actually do this thing more than weaker shooters? And I think that's the path that I want to take from now on, is continue to quantify all these different things that I value as a coach, and then study them, because we've now done 2 studies, and on the first one, the hypothesis was supported. What better shooters do in fact do this more than weaker shooters. But on the second, we had to pivot. We went in with a certain idea on release curvature that we talked about in the previous episode. We had a hypothesis, and it turned out that hypothesis was not supported by the evidence. And so then you have the opportunity to say, okay, how do we manipulate this? Like, in other words, how do I need to change my coaching? How do I need to adjust my view of what's important in order to make this true? I don't like the way that I phrase that, because it sounds like you're manipulating, but you're adjusting your thought process. You're asking a better question. The question that I asked is not supported. What question do I need to ask to have the evidence support my teaching? And so then we've come out. We've got release curvature and we've got release quality out of those 2 ideas.
The coolest thing about this, Dave, is like, when we're talking about objective fact, like, you are at the forefront. If theory about shooting the basketball is a metric itself, you are in the top 1 percentile already, right? Like, you are doing this at the highest level in the world. You had an idea that you felt strongly enough about to do a study, and you're like, whoops, wasn't right. Now, you pivoted, found how that was applicable. But I'm also like, for the other 99% of us, what do we think about shooting that's wrong? You know, like, you've sorted out a few things probably that I'm still working on, I would imagine. But what else that is a general conception or a general thought or a generally accepted principle that you're like, actually, data doesn't bear that out. Thanks for coming out, though. You know?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because it's been a lot of work, and it's been something that I've kept fairly quiet. But I think it's important for exactly the reason that you're saying, is that everything that we've talked about, everything that we coach with, is based on an opinion, and you can make up an anecdote that makes it sound like your opinion is science-based or fact-based, and it's not. And this is still largely me as well, but I've got a few things that are now more evidence-based. And because of those couple of things, I've got a lot of better questions that are now like somewhat shaped by evidence that we now need to figure out, okay, because A is true, B is affected by A, or a hypothesis on B is now this. Let's figure out how to quantify that and study that. And we may end up finding down the road that maybe we didn't have release quality exactly right, that there will be future learning that goes into a lot of different things, but that process has to start somewhere. And in the NBA right now, teams have access after this past season. For the first time, they have XYZ data on 27 different body parts plus the basketball, 60 frames per second during the course of a basketball game. And most teams are looking at that saying, there's got to be a ton of valuable information in here, and we have no idea where to start. And I'm just putting up my hand saying, I know where to start. I feel like with these two ideas, release curvature or release quality, we've proven has a relationship to lateral misses, left-right misses. Release curvature has a relationship to long-short misses and distance and arc control. And so when you put those two things together, you now have basically the basketball version of, if you square up your club face and you swing along the target line, the ball goes straight. So however you do it, we just want to make sure, are you squaring up your club face or are you swinging along the target line? And in the past with shooting, we've excuse me, we've been coaching with our opinion, we've been coaching to anecdotes, and now there's all sorts of things that are going to come from ShotMetrics where it's, okay, do these moves, do these positions that we've been talking about as shooting coaches, do they improve the release quality or the release curvature, or do they harm it? And so now all of a sudden we have the basketball version of pitch design, which is drill design. Like, do the drills actually address the habit that you're working on, and have the effect that you hope to have? And that's what I'm really excited about over the next year for myself, is to be able to say, like, okay, now I can do this faster. I'm not having to turn around this data in weeks. I'm able to turn around this data in hours, which means I can have a player address something from data, do some drills, check the data, and then say to them the next day, we got to keep going because, yeah, this drill is having the desired effect. So that's just one of the benefits that I'm fired up about with ShotMetrics.
It's the combination of your experience and your thought process, and you able to see something, and then putting it on paper to be like, yeah, total bears out. Like, okay, can I ask you to tell a story? You told me a story one time about the idea of the ball come out of your hand well. Can you tell that story real quick?
Yeah. So this would be 2013 or 14, somewhere, I think probably 2013. We can look it up whenever Bradley Beal was a rookie. And so I'm at Summer League, I believe, with the Cavaliers. That's why I think it was 2013. And I went to meet my mentor, who's also a shooting coach. And we're standing in basically an empty Thomas and Mack Center before the first game, but there's a young Bradley Beal out on the floor. And I think he was the only player, if I remember correctly, and might have had like one person rebounding for us. And I felt like me and my mentor were one of only a dozen people in the arena. Maybe that's not true, but that's how I remember it. And we're just chatting. And he's sort of, we're both watching this young guy shoot and just talking about something else. And he just makes this offhand comment. He says, oh, the ball leaves his hand well. And just the way he said it, I'm like, that's the perfect way to say this complicated thing that I've had my way of saying it, but it was 2 paragraphs long. And then you just covered it in however many words that is, 5 words. Ball, 6 words. And it just totally resonated with me. Or maybe it made something that I couldn't articulate clear in my mind. It just clicked for me. And that's essentially what release quality is how well do you push both sides of the ball towards the target? If you push both sides of the ball evenly and towards the target, the ball goes straight. It's just physics. Now, with the human hand, there's a bunch of ways to screw that up. But when you push both sides of the ball evenly and towards the target, the ball goes straight and it spins purely. If you push one side of the ball more than the other, you will either push the ball away from the rim or require a compensating move in the opposite direction to cancel the first one out. And no matter which of those you do, the ball's not going to spin purely. And the more you push the ball away from the target, you push in an ineffective way, the more the ball is going to spin off axis. In other words, you're hitting more of a slice or a draw or a hook. And the ball path isn't necessarily going to curve the way that a baseball or a golf ball does. That's not why we're the most worried about it. It's just the spin of the ball indicates kind of where the hand was.
My question for you, given that, thank you for telling that story. My point of asking you to tell that is an eye test comment that explains a super complicated idea in a very simple way, which I love, first of all. Have you found, I know you have thousands and thousands of shots now of data, have you found that eye test has borne out in the data? Like, what does that look like?
Now, yes.
Thank you.
But with exceptions, like, as soon as I say this, you go, oh yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. You can be a bad shooter with good release quality. Ooh. That can still, which you think, well, okay, then the metric doesn't work. No, that's just measuring one part of the shot. You can push both sides of the ball well and towards the target, and your release quality is going to be great, but the ball never gets above the rim. You shoot it with too flat of arc, and so that's the reason that you stink as a shooter. Not you, Matt. You're a great shooter. You're really good.
Stop it.
But it's just it's measuring. The ShotMetrics are measuring parts of the shot to give an indicator, and just about everybody who is a red for their release quality. Like we sort of, at this point, we have green, yellow, orange, and red. Green being the best, red being the worst, and pretty much everybody who's a red has been a poor shooter. It's very tough to create red kinds of spin and get the ball to consistently go straight. And so on the flip side, you can be a yellow and still be great. It's just, while not optimal, you're able to repeat it. You're able to be consistent, and that's my little lead in to the next topic. You're able to repeat it and be consistent, even though it might not be optimal. It doesn't need to be optimal. You can hit a little draw and still get the ball to go towards the flag. It's tougher to do that when you hit a duck hook.
Okay, Dave, let's take another break. We're going to talk about consistency when we get back from the break.
Hey basketball fans, Coach Dave Love here with an exclusive offer just for you, my personalized video shot analysis. Imagine having an NBA shooting coach analyze your shooting form, just like I do for the pros. That's exactly what you'll get with my video shot analysis. Here's how it works. You send me a video of your shot and I'll break it down frame by frame. I'll pinpoint your strengths and identify the areas of improvement and give you tailored advice to take your shot to the next level. You'll receive a comprehensive analysis designed just for you. Whether you're a beginner or an aspiring pro, my feedback will help you shoot with confidence and precision. It isn't just feedback, it's a game changer. With my video shot analysis, you're not just practicing, you're evolving, and every single shot counts. Ready to transform your game? Visit CoachDaveLove.com/store to learn more and get started. That's CoachDaveLove.com/store and look for video shot analysis.
All right, welcome back. Dave, talk to me about consistency. The concept of a pure release and a bad shooter being together hurts my brain to think about. So tell me why it makes sense. I know you explained it a little bit pre-break, but let's dive into that just a dash more. Don't want to step too much on the full episode, but
So you want me to dive into consistency?
just I don't want you to dive in. I want you to scratch the surface.
Well, this is another of the benefits of ShotMetrics is when you can quantify one the axis of rotation of one shot, the release quality of one shot, you can now compare shots. And so we've always been talking about consistency as coaches strictly by their results or by an eye test. And I've now measured enough shots that I know eye tests lie. That I've seen enough videos where I'm like, oh yeah, no, or seen enough shots in person where I've thought, oh, that is completely different. And then you look at the video and you go, oh, that's not different at all. My brain tricked me into thinking that was different. So eye tests can lie to us. And then when we're using only the results to measure consistency, it's really easy to oversimplify the practice situation so we get the mirage of good results. He's becoming more consistent. Yeah, because you keep practicing in easier and easier environments. When we should be doing the opposite. We should be practicing in more and more game-like environments. And now, how do we measure the consistency now? Well, how tightly do they repeat their standard deviation of release qualities? When you can measure one, you can compare two to each other. And so there's the best shooter that we've tracked to this point, whose name is Brady Hessel, played in the G League, played over in Europe, was a star at Baylor University, 43% three-point shooter everywhere he went, thumbs the ball, and has a yellow, like good but not great release quality. So, okay, well, maybe that's an indicator that we should worry about this. His release is good, but it's not great. Except when you compare 23s, he repeats that. He was twice as consistent in repeating how the ball leaves his hand, even with the complicated release, twice as consistent as the next most consistent person, who was the leading three-point shooter in NCAA history. I can't remember if it's for a career or for a season, but Steve Kerr. Like, Brady was a machine compared to the next best guy who was also great. And how do we know this? Because we can now compare not just the result of X number of shots, but this one part of X number of shots. And so, sorry, go ahead.
You kind of stole my joke. I was going to say, because they both hit 93 out of 100. And it's like, no. Well, yes, they did that, but also it's not the reason why you can compare them.
Yeah, and so, like, on the flip side, I've had weak shooters who shoot a curveball or shoot a slice with the ball spinning off axis, horrible release quality, but they repeat it fairly consistently in the controlled environment of the study or the measurement. It's just as soon as they get into a game, they can't repeat that complicated motion. Or I've had weak shooters who, on average, the spin looks great to the eye test. It looks like they push both sides of the ball evenly. but the consistency of their results or the consistency of their release quality can be horrendous. That they shoot a slightly different kind of spin. Like most players will repeat one kind of spin. It might be tilted down on the right side. It might be tilted down away from them on the right-hand side. It may be tilted away from them. They'll repeat the same kind. But I've had some guys who it's one shot is slightly tilted up, the next shot is slightly tilted down, the next shot is slightly tilted towards them, the next shot is slightly tilted away. They're repeating a different kind of shot because they're so inconsistent, and that also makes it difficult to be a consistent shooter.
So this is awesome, Dave. You've kind of given us a peek at release quality. We talked about release curvature last episode. So as we kind of go to the close here, like I think I know the answer to this, but how do you think this? Why is this important? What's the applicability of this? Like, what situations do you think this is beneficial in?
We're going to be able to learn what habits actually help and what habits actually hurt, instead of being able to give, well, Steph Curry does this and he's a great shooter, so therefore I think you should do that. We're going to get out of that anecdotal evidence and get more to evidence-based. We're then going to know what habits actually help. We're then going to learn what drills actually build those habits. And I can't tell you how many drill descriptions I've heard where somebody says, "Oh, we're working on this," and they describe their drill, and I think, I don't think that actually works on what you say it's working on, but I don't have a way to prove it. We're going to have a way to prove it. Your coaching is not having the desired effect, which will then increase player buy-in. The more that we study, the better questions we're going to be continuing to ask. And so I feel like we've learned a lot just from having these two metrics. And the biggest value is now I know the next 98 questions. And out of those next 98 questions, I'm going to learn the next 9,000 questions after that. But we're just going to get better and faster at studying and understanding and quantifying. Like in the beginning, it took us 10 minutes to quantify the release curvature of a single shot because we had to do it by hand. It took 10 minutes and we needed about 100 shots to have a relevant statistical, what's the word I'm looking for? So like it was, set. Yeah, like it took hours for us to do this. And now, okay, we proved it was relevant. We were willing to invest some time. And so we created a way to do that in minutes. Well, in the not too distant future, somebody's going to be able to do that in real time. Like shoot a basketball and the number comes up on the screen. And so the turnaround on our learning is going to be accelerated. And I always, as I start to go down this road, I want to make sure I was ahead of the curve. That I was using my experience to share. I think these are where I think we should start. This is what I would teach as a coach. Now let's see where I've been on the money and where I've been off the mark, and let me adjust my coaching, and then let me kind of give you my opinion on what's the next thing. Because some of the people that I've worked with, excellent data scientists, but they've studied baseball. They haven't got a clue about what goes into shooting a basketball. And I'm a below average now data scientist, but I think I have a pretty good understanding of shooting mechanics.
I know.
So I think it's possible somebody shoots 60% from the 3-point line. Like on a good number of attempts. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Breaks my brain, buddy. I know you're working on 4 or 5 other ideas and numbers, and I don't want to get into that. It's future stuff. But man, I just think about, we did a lot of player evaluation when I was coaching in the NBL Canada team. We go to Vegas, we go to 17 different scout events, and you're just trying to pick up something from anything, from a run or from a workout or from whatever. And to be able for you to go into a pre-draft work, I know there's a ton of value in the coaching aspect of things, but all I can think about is player evaluation. Like, this dude shot, there's always a guy in the draft who's like, well, he shot 22% from three his first 2 years, 33 his third, and then 37 his fourth. Look at that progression. And you're like, well, sample size. Like, talk about that. This is the last thing I want to talk about because we're kind of probably coming up on time here, but just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was with an NBA team recently. I won't say which one. And I was creating these reports of here's the shot metrics on this player, and giving the reports, and people were interested in it, but I don't think anybody was actually taking these reports seriously. But there's one player who, as I'm taking the video, I'm like, this has got to be the most off-axis rotation that I've maybe ever measured. And he's also a horrible shooter. And so for that guy, we finished compiling the video that we're going to pull the data out of. And I just said, can I spend 15 minutes with you as a coach? He's like, yeah, please. So, all right, here's what I want you to do. I want you to set up in this position. I want to just see if you can get the ball spinning purely, which is a great external cue. And then, okay, just so figure out where you need to position yourself in order to make a positive move out of that set point and make the ball spin purely. And within 5 shots, he was doing that pretty well. And so I went to one of the people kind of in charge of the pre-draft evaluation. I'm like, I know he's horrible right now, but just know he picked up on this really, really quickly. And that information is incredibly valuable, I believe. And I think we're a couple of years away from people really understanding what all of this means. And unfortunately, I do, because I've been doing this for 5 years now. Like, I've been talking about this. I've been figuring out how not to explain it, and still kind of working out how to explain it so that it makes sense to somebody that's just experiencing it for the first time. But 5 years down the road, a lot more people are going to understand this a lot better, but the advantage is going to be to the people that got on it early. I wanted to make sure I was that person, and now I'm sharing it with my friends or my coworkers.
I think about the movie Moneyball and the sort of island of misfit toys, like the sinker baller who has the submarine relief pitcher, and the guy who can't play, who's never played first base before, but or the guy with the bad body or whatever. Like, all the things that lead us to having these biases against these players in evaluation. Like, one of the best shooters I ever played with has a funky jump shot. Like, it's a little Larry Bird. It's over his head. The finish is perfect, but it looks so funky. And if you don't spend the time in the evaluation process to be like, Wong's actually a pretty freaking good shooter, you might look at it and just be like, ugh, like, not interested. I think our unconscious biases and the eye test that we lean on and trust just lead us astray so much in ways that we can't understand until you're able to do what you do.
Yeah. Like Jim Furyk for the old heads in, let's be honest, nobody young and cool is listening. I shouldn't say that. Nobody young is listening to our podcast. Lots of cool people are, though.
Yeah, that's right.
In fact, I would go so far as to say everybody that's listening is cool.
The coolest.
And now I've lost my point, but Jim Furyk, ugly golf swing, or like nobody would teach somebody to swing a golf club like that. But at his peak, I think he was top 3 in the world. So he found a way that worked, and I would guess that if you measured if if a golf metric was club face, how square is the club face and swinging along the target line, if pros were trying to do that well, then I would guess he was off the charts at that. He just had a weird way of doing it. And Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods in his prime, those guys probably had the conventional way of doing it. But the result was the same. It's just different signatures on it.
The Klay Thompson version rather than the Steph Curry version, right?
Yeah. And so that's what I hope to do with ShotMetrics, is to identify different parts of the shot, figure out how to quantify them, study those things to prove their relevance, prove or disprove their relevance, and adjust the coaching based on that evidence, and then figure out drills that actually hold people accountable. And I'm thrilled that now, after doing this for 4 years, I'm certainly not where I want to be 5 years from now, but I'm on the road, and I think that a lot of my competitors don't even know there's a race going on. And so I'm excited about that.
Dave Love, super exciting stuff going on. I really appreciate you sharing this with me and with the broader group, because I think that this is really important for the future of the game, honestly, which is a wild thing to say, but here we are. Coach Dave, where can the people find you if they want to reach out and get in touch?
I would like you to go to CoachDaveLove.com and sign up for my newsletter there. Check out the blogs after signing up for the newsletter. We've got some explanations of different things that sometimes we've covered on past podcasts, or things that we will be covering on future podcasts, so you can get kind of a jump start on some ideas. And then follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Coach Dave Love. Where can people find you, Matthew?
I'm mostly on LinkedIn at Matt Robertson, and I am on X at Coach Matty Rob, although I will admit, especially given the events of the last week, I have been off that for quite a little while, so I will be reemerging at some point in the near future. But I just really appreciate people listening to the podcast. If you are a frequent listener, please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. It all really helps. I know I've learned a ton doing this, and I hope you have as well. So, Dave, thanks for the time, and listener, we'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Coach Dave Love Podcast. To stay up to date with our future episodes, please remember to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to sign up for Coach Love's free shooting newsletter on CoachDaveLove.com, and be sure to follow him on social media. You can find him at Coach Dave Love.